They won't tell you this at your regular doctor's visit, okay? But let me be blunt. If you've stopped masturbating in your later years, your body might already be breaking down, and you probably don't even know it. No? Guess isn't some taboo topic or locker room nonsense. This is real, clinical, physiological truth, and the consequences of ignoring this truth can be devastating, not just to your sexual health, but to your brain, your heart, your sleep, your immune system, and even your sense of self. My name is Dr. Mohit Kara. I'm a urologist and men's health specialist with over 30 years of experience working with aging patients across the country. Spent my career studying how the body changes as we grow older, especially when it comes to intimacy, hormones, and long-term vitality. One of the biggest silent threats I've seen is this: too many older adults abandon their sexual health, and with it, a major key to their overall well-being. Here's what may surprise you. Masturbation isn't just a leftover impulse from your younger years. It's actually one of the most powerful tools your aging body still has to regulate your hormones, boost your brain, protect your prostate, and even fight off depression. If you've stopped or never started, the price you're paying might be far higher than you think. In the next few moments, I'm going to walk you through exactly what happens inside your body when you stop masturbating in old age. And what I share may completely change how you look at your health and yourself from this moment forward. Before we get started, if you care about staying sharp, healthy, and independent as you age, go ahead and subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss important advice tailored just for you. And if this message resonates with you, type 1 in the comments. If not, type 0. Your feedback helps me create content that truly supports your health and well-being. Now, let's begin with the first and perhaps most overlooked consequence of not masturbating in old age: what it quietly does to your prostate and urinary health. 1. Decreased prostate health and urinary function. When I first began practicing urology over 3 decades ago, I didn't expect so many of my patients to open up about something so private, yet so critical to their health: the quiet disappearance of sexual habits in their later years. One man I remember clearly sat across from me and said, "Doc, I just figured I didn't need that part of life anymore." He was in his early 70s, fit and sharp, but he'd been waking up 4 or 5 times a night just to use the bathroom and couldn't understand why. What he didn't know, and what most men don't realize, is that regular ejaculation, even through masturbation, plays a crucial role in keeping the prostate functioning properly. The prostate is not just some passive gland sitting in the body. It's a living, dynamic organ. It produces fluid, it expands and contracts, and like any system, it suffers when neglected. Without regular stimulation and release, prostate fluid can stagnate. That stagnation creates the perfect environment for inflammation, swelling, and eventually the kind of pressure that disrupts everything from urination to sexual performance. You might feel it as a heavier bladder, weaker stream, or an uncomfortable sense of fullness that won't go away. These aren't just annoyances, they are early warnings. Here's the dangerous part: chronic prostate congestion can quietly escalate into more serious conditions like benign prostatic hyperplasia, or BPH, which affects nearly 50% of men over 60. Left unchecked, it can lead to urinary retention, bladder infections, and even the need for catheterization. That same man I mentioned eventually needed surgery to relieve the pressure, something that, had we addressed it earlier through simple, consistent habits, might have been avoided. Regular ejaculation helps flush out the prostate, clear out old fluid, and reduce the risk of buildup. In fact, studies have shown that men who ejaculate 21 times or more, month, are significantly less likely to develop prostate cancer than those who don't. Let me be very clear. We are not talking about a return to youth or some kind of obsessive behavior. This is not about fantasy, This is about function, about using your biology to protect your body in the simplest, most natural way possible. When you stop masturbating in old age, you're not just ignoring pleasure, risking pain, inflammation, and a gradual loss of control over one of the most basic human functions. Urination. I've had patients who have become afraid to leave their homes because they don't trust their bladder. I've seen strong, proud men reduced to sleepless nights and daytime anxiety over a condition that might have been managed or prevented with something as simple as regular self-stimulation. Yes, there's a mental toll as well. Losing control of your body in this way, needing to map out bathroom breaks, dreading long car rides, waking every 2 hours in night teats at your sense of independence. It's not just about your prostate, it's about your freedom. But here's where it gets even more surprising. What starts in the prostate doesn't stay there. The next consequence affects not just your body, but your brain. Once it begins, it can alter the way you think, feel, and remember, sometimes in ways that are difficult to reverse. Let's talk about what happens to your mental clarity and cognition when self-stimulation disappears from your routine. If you're still here and these insights are resonating with you, type the number 1 in the comments. It lets me know you're still with me, still engaged, and still valuing this message. Now, let's continue with point number 2. 2. Cognitive fog and reduced mental clarity. Not long ago, a patient in his late 60s came to see me. He wasn't complaining about his prostate or his energy levels. He just said something that struck me. "Doc, I don't feel like myself anymore. I walk into a room and forget why I'm there. I lose my train of thought mid-sentence. I used to be so sharp. This just old age?" It's a question I hear more often than you'd think. Yes, aging naturally brings some cognitive changes. But what most people, even highly educated, health-conscious adults, don't know is that sexual activity, including masturbation, plays a powerful role in protecting brain function. Here's what happens when you engage in self-pleasure. Your brain releases a cocktail of neurochemicals: dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, all of which are directly linked to memory, focus, and emotional regulation. These chemicals aren't just about feeling good in the moment. They help build and protect neural connections, stimulate blood flow to the brain, and reduce cortisol, the stress hormone that, in high amounts, actually damages brain cells. Now, when you stop masturbating, especially over a long period, those natural brain protective chemical surges become less frequent. Over time, this can dull your mental edge. You may find it harder to concentrate, harder to process information, or even harder to feel motivated. It doesn't happen overnight. It sneaks in slowly. First, you forget names. Then you forget what day it is. Then you start to doubt your mind entirely. And in that doubt, something worse can take root: fear. I've seen patients spiral into anxiety and depression simply because they believed they were losing their minds, when in reality, their brain was starved of stimulation and chemical balance. In men, there's an added hormonal shift. It's testosterone, the hormone deeply tied to memory, decisiveness, and vitality, can decline faster when sexual activity drops to near zero. Testosterone isn't just about libido. It's about your sense of self, your strength, your clarity. And yes, frequent, healthy ejaculation can help regulate and preserve testosterone levels as you age. Some studies have even begun linking reduced sexual activity in older adults to early signs of cognitive decline, even dementia. Now, I'm not saying stopping masturbation causes Alzheimer's, okay? But I am saying this: when the brain is deprived of stimulation, emotional release, and hormonal support, it becomes more vulnerable. It loses its rhythm, its resilience, and for many people, the fog becomes thick enough to change the way they live, how they interact, how they think, how they see themselves. One man told me he stopped going to his chess club because he couldn't focus on the game anymore. Another, a retired teacher, said he felt blank every morning. These weren't memory problems that required medication. They were symptoms of a life disconnected from physical intimacy. even with oneself. And here's the tragic part. These are avoidable. You don't need expensive pills or therapies. Sometimes it starts by reconnecting with your body, giving it the attention it quietly craves. 'Cause when you stimulate the body, you awaken the brain. But this loss of mental sharpness is just one part of the equation. What happens next when emotional balance begins to erode and your mood starts slipping without warning can be even more subtle, more damaging, and much harder to talk about. Let's explore how giving up self-intimacy can silently invite depression into your daily life. Heightened depression and emotional numbness. I once had a patient in his early 70s, a widower, tired, relatively healthy, who came to me not for a physical ailment, but for something he couldn't quite explain. He looked me in the eye and said, "I don't feel anything anymore. Not sadness, not joy, just flat." He paused, then added, "Is that normal for someone my age?" That question still echoes in my mind, because I hear variations of it all the time. What many people assume is simply part of aging. The dullness, the disconnection, the slow fading of emotion often has a deeper, more physiological cause, and one that no one likes to talk about: the loss of sexual stimulation, particularly self-pleasure. Here's the truth. When you stop engaging with your own body in an intimate, physical way, your emotional landscape can begin to shift in quiet but profound ways. Masturbation is not just a physical act. It's also an emotional release. It's your body's built-in stress relief system. During climax, the brain releases powerful chemicals like oxytocin and endorphins, natural mood stabilizers that combat anxiety, tension, and low mood. When you remove that release from your life, especially during the time when stress, loneliness, or grief are already present, you risk becoming emotionally numb. And that numbness can evolve into something more dangerous: depression. I've seen it unfold slowly. Someone stops masturbating after losing a partner, or because they think it's no longer age appropriate. Weeks turn into months. They become quieter, more withdrawn. They lose interest in hobbies, even in conversation. They sleep more or not enough. Appetite changes. Life starts to feel gray. And the cruel irony: most don't realize the connection. They blame themselves or their age. They think it's just the way life is now. But in reality, what they're missing is the simple but essential act of connecting with their own body, not for pleasure's sake alone, but for emotional survival. Depression in older adults is often underdiagnosed because it doesn't always show up as sadness. Sometimes it shows up as fatigue, irritability, detachment, or the absence of motivation. The absence of desire. And while medication and therapy are important tools, I can't tell you how many patients I've helped simply by encouraging them to reclaim physical self-intimacy. One man told me he felt alive again after beginning to touch himself regularly for the first time in years. He said it didn't just lift his mood, it reminded him that he was still a human being, not just a body waiting to shut down. That small act gave him back a piece of himself he thought was gone forever. This is what I want you to understand. Masturbation in later life isn't about fantasy, lust, or shame. It's about keeping your emotional system healthy. It's about giving your body a reason to feel, to release, to remember what it means to be present. Because when you lose that connection, you're not just risking sadness, you're risking isolation, emotional atrophy, and in some cases, the very will to engage with life. But the emotional consequences aren't the only ones. As the nights grow longer and your sleep becomes more broken, another hidden cost begins to rise, one that can affect your memory, your immune system, and your risk for serious disease. Let's talk next about how the absence of sexual release might be stealing the deep, healing sleep your body desperately needs. If you're still watching and finding these insights meaningful, go ahead and type the number 1 in the comments to let me know you're here and following along. Now, let's move forward with point number 4. Poor sleep quality. Remember a man in his late 60s who came to me after months of poor sleep. He looked worn out, pale, frustrated. Doc, he said, I fall asleep, but I wake up at 2 a.m. like I've been shot out of a cannon. Then I just lie there staring at the ceiling, waiting for morning. We ran tests. His labs were clean, no apnea, no major red flags. But when I gently asked him about his intimate life, he looked away. That part of me, he muttered, is over. Okay. But that part of him, the part he thought had expired, okay, was possibly the very key to what his body was crying out for. Restorative, uninterrupted sleep. Sleep isn't just about closing your eyes and lying still. It's a complex hormonal process. One of the most effective natural triggers for deep sleep is something most people forget after a certain age: orgasm. During climax, your body releases oxytocin, prolactin, endorphins, perfect chemical cocktail designed by nature to shift the nervous system from stress to rest. At the same time, cortisol, the hormone responsible for anxiety and wakefulness, drops sharply. Your breathing slows, your heart rate steadies, your muscles relax. You enter the ideal state for deep sleep. Now, imagine cutting that process out of your life entirely, not just once, but for weeks, months, even years. That's what happens when older adults stop masturbating. The body loses a natural tool it once relied on, and what fills the gap often is restlessness, frustration, tossing and turning. Some turn to sleeping pills. Others simply accept exhaustion as their new normal. But the consequences of poor sleep go far beyond just feeling tired. Chronic sleep deprivation weakens the immune system, accelerates cognitive decline, raises the risk of heart disease, and increases vulnerability to anxiety and depression in older adults. It also contributes to falls, memory issues, and loss of independence. I've seen patients who once led active, engaged lives slowly withdrawn because of any major illness, but simply because they were too exhausted to function. And here's where it gets truly alarming. Many of them didn't know they were missing the one thing that used to help them sleep, not a drug, not a supplement, but their own body's built-in release valve. Masturbation may seem like a small, even, trivial act, but for some, it can be the difference between 4 hours of fragmented sleep and 7 hours of deep, healing rest. One patient told me, after reconnecting with this part of himself, I sleep like I did 30 years ago. I didn't realize how much I needed that release. I thought I was just getting old. That's the problem. Too many people mistake biological neglect for aging, and they suffer silently as a result. If you find yourself lying awake at night, mind racing, muscles tight, hours dragging by, ask yourself, when was the last time your body felt fully relaxed, fully let go? Sometimes the answer isn't a new medication or a breathing app. Sometimes it's about rediscovering an old rhythm your body still remembers if you let it. But while sleep loss can quietly erode your energy and mental clarity, the next consequence we'll explore is even more physical. It shows up in how your muscles weaken, your balance shifts, okay, and your bladder begins to betray you. Let's talk about what really happens to your pelvic floor and circulation when intimacy disappears. 5. Weakened pelvic floor and blood circulations. Several years ago, I treated a retired firefighter in his 70s, proud, physically strong man for most of his life. He came to me complaining of mild urinary leakage and difficulty standing for long periods without discomfort in his lower back and hips. It's strange, he said. I feel like the foundation of my body is slowly giving out. What he was describing wasn't just aging. It was the slow, quiet weakening of his pelvic floor. And he wasn't alone. The pelvic floor is a group of muscles at the base of your core, the very ones that support your bladder, bowel, and sexual organs. Most people don't think about these muscles until something goes wrong. Urine leakage. constipation, erectile dysfunction, or discomfort when standing or walking. But here's the part that's often ignored. Regular sexual stimulation, including masturbation, plays a major role in keeping those muscles active and engaged. You see, during arousal and orgasm, the pelvic floor contracts rhythmically. The contracting is a workout not for vanity, but for function. T improves blood flow to the lower body, strengthens the internal support system. K, it keeps the nerves and muscles communicating effectively. It's not about performance, it's about preservation. When you stop masturbating regularly, those muscles don't just go quiet, they begin to atrophy. Blood flow slows down, tissue becomes less elastic, nerve response fades, and eventually you may find yourself struggling with symptoms you never expected. Frequent urges to urinate, slight dribbling after using the bathroom, difficulty holding, gas, or even pain during movement. For men, this can mean a dramatic drop in sexual function. For women, it can lead to dryness, tension, and discomfort that discourages all intimacy. I've seen once independent adults, begin avoiding social outings simply because they don't trust their bladder. I've seen others become embarrassed about sudden leaks when coughing or sneezing, not knowing that this all traces back to something they've neglected for years: circulation and muscle activity in the pelvic region. And here's something I need to say clearly: ignoring this area isn't just inconvenient. It can lead to falls, incontinence, and a loss of dignity that no one deserves. You might start relying on pads, special undergarments, bathroom proximity planning, all because the base of your body isn't getting the stimulation and support it needs. And the longer it goes on, the harder it becomes to reverse. What breaks my heart is how many people suffer in silence. They don't talk about it, They feel ashamed, confused, or assume it's just part of growing older. But I can't stress this enough. Your body still wants to function, even at 70, 80, or beyond. It's one of the most effective natural ways to support it without medication or equipment. 'Tis through safe, regular, intimate stimulation. When you reclaim that connection, you're not just activating pleasure. You're restoring strength, sending blood where it's needed most, waking up nerves, keeping tissues alive, and reminding your lower body that it still matters. But as physical as this consequence is, the next one goes even deeper inside your immune system, your cellular defenses, and your body's ability to protect you from illness. Because what happens inside your bloodstream after orgasm might be one of the most important and most overlooked health advantages of all. Let's talk about how sexual inactivity could be quietly weakening your immunity. 6. Lower immune function. A few winters ago, one of my longtime patients, a man in his late 60s who'd always been relatively healthy, came in looking drained. He'd been sick 3 times that season with lingering colds and low-grade infections. I used to bounce back in a day or two, he told me. Now, every little bug knocks me out for weeks. When we ruled out the usual suspects: diet, sleep, medication, he gently asked about another area of his life. Have you been sexually active at all? Even alone? He smiled uncomfortably, then shook his head. Nah, not for a long time. Part of me is just retired. What he didn't realize, and what most people don't, is that sexual activity, including masturbation, has a direct impact on the immune system. That's not a metaphor, it's biology. During sexual arousal, and especially orgasm, your body produces a surge of biochemicals, not just dopamine and oxytocin, which make you feel good, but actual immune-enhancing agents. Immunoglobulin AEK, for example, rises significantly. This is a key antibody that helps defend your body against viruses, bacteria, and infections, especially in the respiratory and digestive systems. Endorphins are also released, reducing inflammation and supporting healing. Now imagine going without that boost, not just for a week, but for months or years. Your body starts to lose one of its easiest, most natural defenses, in a time of life when your immune system is already slowing down. Taking away this mechanism is like pulling the batteries from your smoke detector. You might not notice at first, but when trouble hits, your body won't respond like it used to. I've seen this play out in real time. Patients who've shut down their intimate lives often find themselves getting sick more frequently, recovering more slowly, or experiencing flare-ups of chronic inflammation. And while they may not connect the dots, their body is sending a clear signal. Something's missing, and it's not just about fighting off the flu. The immune system is deeply tied to long-term disease prevention, cancer surveillance, cardiovascular protection, even wound healing. Regular sexual release helps maintain hormonal balance, reduce stress hormones like cortisol, and increase circulation, all of which are crucial for maintaining immunity. When that disappears, the domino effect begins. Stress increases, sleep suffers, inflammation rises, and your body becomes a slower, weaker version of what it once was. One woman in her 70s, after losing her husband, told me she hadn't touched herself in nearly 5 years. When we talked honestly about the connection between sexual activity and immune strength, she decided to try reconnecting with that part of herself, again not for desire, but for wellness. Months later, she returned, with brighter eyes and more energy. "I can't explain it," she said, "but I just feel more alive, like my body is working with me again, not against me." That's not magic. That's what happens when the body gets the signals it needs, signals that say, we're still here, we still want to thrive. It's easy to overlook, dismiss, or feel awkward about, but your immune system doesn't care about shame. It only responds to action, and sexual stimulation, even solo-wise, a powerful action. It's one that sends a message of life and strength through every cell in your body. But while lowered immunity may expose your body to disease, the final consequence of neglecting self-intimacy might cut even deeper into your very sense of identity. Because when you stop touching your body, you may slowly stop recognizing who you are. Let's explore how self-neglect can quietly erode your self-worth and what you can do to reclaim it. 7. Loss of body ownership and self-worth. Never forget a quiet conversation I had with a patient in his late 70s. He was a retired school principal, once confident, quick-witted, the kind of man who used to command a room. But when he came in for routine checkup, something in his posture had changed. Shoulders slightly hunched, eyes a little dimmer. As we talked, he sighed and said, "I don't really feel like I live in this body anymore. I feel like I'm just inhabiting it." That sentence stayed with me because what he described isn't uncommon. I've heard it from both men and women in different words, but with the same underlying truth. Somewhere along the way, they stopped feeling at home in their own skin. And too often, it starts with silence, with giving up self-intimacy. Brushing it off is no longer necessary. Too late in life, or something I've outgrown. But here's what really happens when you stop touching your body, when you stop paying attention to it in that deeply personal way. You begin to disconnect from it slowly, quietly, and sometimes permanently. Self-touch isn't just about pleasure. It's about presence. When you stimulate your body, even gently, even with no goal other than to feel you, remind your nervous system that you are still here, that you matter, that your body is still part of your identity, not just a vessel you're waiting to leave behind. Without that, something changes. A kind of emotional and psychological distance forms. It becomes easier to ignore small aches, easier to stop looking in the mirror, easier to believe that this chapter of life isn't worth nurturing. And that is the most dangerous loss of all. The loss of your own sense of worth. I've seen this disconnection lead to deep emotional numbness, shame about aging, a withdrawal from physical affection, even a loss of motivation for basic self-care. People stop exercising, eating well, dressing with intention. Why bother? They think, when this body no longer feels like it belongs to me. One woman told me she hadn't touched herself since menopause. "I just stopped feeling like a woman," she said. And the less I touched myself, the more I disappeared. That word, disappeared, hit hard because that's exactly what happens for many older adults who stop engaging with their physical selves. They don't just lose pleasure, they lose identity, visibility, a sense of aliveness. And here's the part I need you to hear. It doesn't have to be this way. Reclaiming your body through self-touch isn't about being sexual in the way you are at 20. It's about honoring the life still present in you. It's about saying, I'm still here. I still feel. I still deserve to be seen, even by myself. When you reconnect with your body, even in the privacy of your own home, you begin to reverse that quiet eraser. You remind yourself that aging is not vanishing, that your worth didn't expire with your youth. You come home to yourself again. And that, perhaps, is the most healing act of all. And now, as we come to the end of this journey, let's tie it all together. Because while each of these 7 consequences is serious on its own, when combined, tell a much larger and much more urgent story. In the final message, I want to show you exactly what's at stake, okay? And more importantly, how you can take back control starting today. Final thoughts? Reclaiming intimacy. Reclaiming health. Looking back over the years I've spent caring for aging patients, what strikes me most is not just the medical challenges they face, but the quiet, visible losses. They carry losses that don't show up in lab results or scans. Man who used to feel confident now avoids mirrors. A woman who once radiated joy says ease. She hasn't felt anything in her body for years. And more often than not, they've been told that this is simply what getting older looks like. But I don't believe that, not for a second, okay? And if you've come with me this far, I don't think you do either. Because here's the truth. The moment you stop caring for your sexual self, the moment you abandon that part of your body and identity, a chain of quiet consequences begins. We've talked about them one by one, how prostate and urinary health can decline when regular release is taken away, how the brain grows foggy, less sharp when it's starved of stimulation, how the absence of physical intimacy can invite depression, dull sleep, weakened circulation, and even compromise the immune system. And perhaps most painful of all, how giving up that private, personal connection with your own body can slowly chip away at your sense of worth until you feel like a stranger to yourself. These are not small things. These are not just a part of aging. These are warning signs that your body, your mind, and your spirit are asking for your attention. I've sat across from patients who felt broken, disconnected, numb, and have seen the transformation in their eyes when they begin to reclaim this part of their life. It doesn't require anyone else. It doesn't demand youth or perfect health. It only requires permission, your permission to see yourself as worthy of intimacy, even now, especially now. I know this is a subject many people shy away from. Some are embarrassed. Others were never taught that it was okay to care for their sexual health beyond a certain age. But I want you to hear this from a doctor who has walked this path with thousands of men and women. It is not only okay, it is essential. Masturbation in later life isn't about indulgence. It's about circulation, clarity, hormonal balance, emotional grounding, immune defense, and identity. It's not a luxury. It's a form of care declaration that you are still alive in this body and still responsible for its well-being. One patient once told me, I didn't realize how much I missed feeling like myself until I finally touched that part of me again. That's what this is about. Not just staying alive, but feeling alive. Not just surviving the years, but inhabiting them with presence, dignity, and joy. So if you've forgotten this part of you, or buried it, or judged it, I invite you now to reconsider, to reconnect, to remember that your body is still listening, still capable, still deserving. Start small with curiosity, with kindness, but most importantly, start. Because in choosing to care for this part of yourself again, you're not only protecting your health, you're reclaiming your life. If this message resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and leave a comment below to let me know your thoughts. Whether you agree, disagree, or have questions, your voice matters and your story might help someone else feel seen.